we're doing first.
That's what it'll be able to-
Well, people have been really nice, but
All right,
I'm
we're gonna
really
get
feeling
started.
old.
Welcome, everybody, October 10th, 2023. It is now 6:38. Welcome to the Admin and Public Works Committee meeting. So we will begin our meeting with the first item on the agenda, which is the roll call.
Good evening, Chair Council Member Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
I am blessed to be here.
Councilmember Edens. I'm here mentally and physically. Councilmember Nian. Here. Councilmember Farmer. Is he online or anything?
I don't believe so.
McCutcheon. Here. Member Jaxie.
Blessed to be next to Councilmember Clark.
And Councilmember Hopper. Do we have him waiting or anything? Okay.
Yes, we do now.
Oh, we do. Okay. All right, he's coming in on Zoom.
All right,
Okay.
ready? All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the September 5th, 2023 meeting. If I can get a motion for approval by Councilmember Clark, then a second by Councilmember McCutcheon. Any questions, discussion on the minutes?
I have
Michelle?
a small item. I made a mistake on the minutes. So on administration for action, I'll read the possible recycling event or recycling event. I put Chair Hopper instead of Council Member Hopper. So I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. we'll,
Change.
Consider that that's just a editorial change on the minutes there. So any other? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? Minutes are approved. All right, next we'll move into public participation. So for the record, we do not have any members of the public in the room here. We do acknowledge Councilmember Ed Marshall here. But is there anyone on Zoom?
No, sir, just Don Kaiser, our city
Finance
director, sorry.
All right, so then seeing that we do not have anyone from the public either in the room or on Zoom, then we'll move forward with the next part of the agenda. And so since we do have an item that will fall under an executive session, I'd like to ask if we can get a motion to rearrange the order of the agenda so that we can first address the city administrative performance review. And that way we'll get that on first, then we can continue with the rest of the meeting items on the agenda. So if there's a motion for that, to rearrange the agenda and make the city administrator performance review the next item, followed by everything else. Councilmember Nian, is there a second? Councilmember Jaxie. All those in favor, motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So now that we've voted on changing the order of the agenda, we will now move into city administrator performance review. So I'll introduce the topic. This is a process that we conduct every year, but given the recent hire of our city administrator, we're going to have opportunity to provide feedback and also hear from our city administrator regarding performance and performance of the role there. So it is an item that qualifies under the closed session, executive session RSMO 610.021, section 13. So in performance ratings. So therefore, if we can get a motion that we would then have that portion of the meeting in executive session, we'll do that. So a motion made by Councilmember Clark and a second. Councilmember Nian, and since this is a motion for executive session, we have to do a roll call.
Chair Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark. Yes. Councilmember Eden. Yes. Councilmember Nian. Yes. Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxie,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Okay, so since we're going to be going into closed session, you need to figure out, I know we have Councilmember Hopper on the Zoom, but I think our plan is what we're gonna go into the,
If someone would like maybe want to call Mr. Hopper,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be we typically don't do Zoom in the other rooms, just
Yeah.
for security purposes.
okay, so we'll do that, so, then we could do that, and then any concern, there's a camera that's in there, is that fine to do that there? Okay, so I guess, we did the roll call already, right? I mean, we did the motion, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
therefore, we'll move into the council chambers, get this part done, and then we'll be back. 5. All right, back to our agenda here. Then we will move into the rest of the items here under for action, because there are none for information. So first time is the review of the 2024 administration budget.
Sorry about that. Councilmember Garrett, thank you, Chair Garitano. Right now, what you're looking at here under the administration, there are anything that I would point out too crazy here. Under the administration piece, though, I will say that we will be adding, and this was noted in the last meeting, that we will be adding the communications and economic development manager role back to the mix, and that is part of the, you'll see that as the second line item under personal expenditures. That person is hopefully going to be hired by December or January of 2023. We have the job posting ready to go, and we should be interviewing here shortly. Another item I did want to note is that we are actually saving some money on the, actually got to get right down here. The equipment leasing, because that, you'll see that number went from 13 to 7,912. That number was calculated based off our change to the cloud-based phone system. So us saving a little bit over $500 a month added up quite nicely. And we're also going to be saving money on our Ricoh printers. So just wanted to point out one of the brighter sides. We have seen nominal gains across the board on most of our items, especially personnel, and covering that personnel with the benefits that we offer, stay competitive. That being said as well, we also have just the typical items of replacing computers, doing standard training, one being then yes, the understanding training, we do have a little bit of an increase there because of media training that we are including, just so we can be a little bit more front facing. And other than that, though, we do have some money set aside for litigation contingencies. We did decrease it because we're hoping to not have as much as we expected last year. We seem to be in a little bit of a better spot there. And overall, we do see nominal gains across the board. I am available now for any questions, if you may have.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, so under salaries, under the general fund for the economic development specialist, is that person also a communications specialist? Is that one and the same job, or is that two separate jobs?
So that is the same job. So how it is, it's worked out in the past is we have a econ dev, since we have the econ dev committee, we actually break it out as its own ledger, general ledger fund account. And in this case, they were retitling it as the communications economic development manager, kind of putting an emphasis on the communications piece, but that individual will still report back to myself and report back to the economic development committee. It is one position.
Okay, and so that's the reason for the increase in salary.
Yes, in that case, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Oh, actually, I do want to straighten that up. So under that salary, what you'll notice in the estimated 2023, before being appointed as the full-time city administrator, technically I was still falling under that role. So my salary was being paid out of that until I believe it was the July city council meeting. So you'll see that the increase is not necessarily an increase. It's more so we'll just have someone there full-time over the course of 12 months. Sorry, I wanted to clear that up.
Okay.
Councilmember Clark.
I just have a question about the goals and the achievements. Under goals, under achievements, is there a way for us to have the last year's goals annexed to that so that we can see what we did achieve and what we didn't, as well as some kind of measurable for those goals? Because when it speaks of, continue to enhance city business retention, it's so vague that we don't see if we've completed it to 100%. Have we improved? Have we declined? Where are we with each of these goals? Because I look through them and a lot of them are just the same goals as the year before. And then the achievements don't always match up with what the goals were. So if we had something that gives a comparison of the last year's, you know, like a paradigm shift on how we put this together. And I'm not asking that you do that. I'm just saying, could that could help me instead of have to look back at it every time and go back and forth at each one of the goals.
Yes, we can definitely try to base those off general SMART goals and then put we'll put the 2023 comparison, just like we did here in our budget presentation. We do an estimated 2023 and we actually include 22 and 21. We'll do the previous year next to the goals. You'll see it under, we could put it under accomplishments. We can note, well, if we can actually discuss how we want to present that. So under the goals, would you want to have it maybe under the accomplishment, attach it to what goal that was going to?
Yeah, that would help.
Okay.
It would even help if the previous year goal was on the same sheet, so you can see, here was my goal. Did I even have any accomplishments pertaining to that? It's just at a glance. Yes.
Yes, the department can definitely prepare that.
Member Edens.
Yeah, okay, so just clarifying on line item 220, the maintenance for the building. So my understanding is once we get the engineering estimates in the other committee, that as it is right now, most of that will have to come from an undefined future revenue source like our reserves. Is that 65,000 already earmarked towards specific things like that we know that we have estimates on, or is that just available funds that we're budgeting?
Can you tell me what you're referring to again?
Yeah, the 220, the maintenance for the building, that
So
65,000.
there's actually additional, so that's that, and I think we can add to it. But under the capital projects, which a lot of these can be called, can be termed capital, we'll get to that under Public Works. There is $100,000 earmarked additional for the building. This is
Okay.
just for that regular maintenance of, individuals coming in to fix a toilet, individuals coming in.
I see.
That's like the actual maintenance portion of it, not the
Okay.
bigger projects of like, hey, the elevator went out, or hey, we put this new sound system in the community room, if that makes sense. That's what it just costs to.
Keep
That's
the
what we
lights
put-
on,
Yes, keep the. lights.
replace the soap, all of that.
Yep.
This is not up for grabs. Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Hey, Tom, are you looking for a motion then to?
Yes, the department today is looking for a motion to approve the budget as is with the inclusion of the 2023 goal, 2022 goals. But then forward on council.
Okay, like to make that motion? Member Clark, and second, Councilmember Edens. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? Great, the motion passes. We're gonna move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the city clerk. So,
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the city clerk budget, we have not seen any drastic increases this year, other than the membership. Well, it's a small increase, but the election expense, we do expect to have a little bit more next year, just because of it being a general election year. So that's what notes that around $2,000 increase. Overall, though, we plan on retaining the 2 employees we currently have, and everything else is nominal gain increases due to the standard inflationary measures. Department's available for any questions this time.
okay, do we have any questions or anyone like to make a motion to approve this budget here?
So moved.
Member Edens and seconded by Councilmember Hudson. Any other questions? Right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the budget, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed or abstain? That passes. Next is the court.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually wanted to note a pretty important item here for what we are getting rid of next year, which has saved us a little bit of money. I think it's around $17,000. We are getting rid of the community service program that the city has. That is not included in this budget. We had a lackluster amount of individuals that would go through that program, and the city was actually on the hook every step of the way for hiring police officers to go with them. And after discussing, and it would literally be 2 police officers out there with 1 individual every weekend paying, a $36, believe it's $36 wage an hour, where they can make, $60 over at the high school for a football game. So we're having more trouble recruiting officers to come on staff to pay for even that rate. So we looked at it and said, if we're going to keep doing this, we're going to have to raise our rate, which then substantially it ended up costing a lot more. And in this case, we will be saving, I believe it's around 17,000 over the course of a year. And we have only had about 6 participants over the course of 2023. So we spend around 17,000 for 6 individuals to partake. These individuals will still be able to do community service to any organization. It just won't be picking up litter on our streets with our police. So we still have connections in our court clerks. They have connections with nonprofit organizations that are enrolled in these programs with St. Louis County, and we could still funnel them through that. This is just taking away the direct community service program provided by Wildwood. So that's the one big change.
So is this a mandated community service program for a particular issue, or is this just?
It was something that was, depending on what the offense was of the individual, they could opt to do that for low, they would have a lesser fine or, a lesser amount. In this case, those individuals will still have the option to go with a nonprofit of their choice that is accepting eligible participants, but they just won't be able to say, hey, I'm signing up for the Wildwood program. And typically what would happen is we would take them out and they would be picking up trash over on Pond, or that was literally what they were doing most of the time.
Yeah, I was just asking because I thought several years ago it was a legal issue and we couldn't have them do that anymore, but we've been still doing
That
it.
we've still had that program available, yeah. So we are officially in this case getting rid of it, but we've been doing it over the last couple of years. It's just we've seen enrollee amounts, the individuals that actually opt to do it, that's decreased quite a bit. And now we're even having trouble on the police side, and you got to have individuals monitoring it. So overall, it was getting more expensive and less people were willing to do it. So overall, we're not seeing that same benefit that it once was. We used to have, it used to be 40 people would enroll in the program every year, which made a lot of sense because then you had, a group of 5 people out there with 2 officers and you actually got a road clean. In this case, we're seeing, they just kind of play on their phone and it's not necessarily community service. That's the main, but that's the biggest change here. Other than that, we'll be keeping the 2.5 employees that we have on staff. And then obviously this does include the prosecuting attorney salary and things along those lines. So most of it, once again, is staff, but the department is available for any other questions.
Or like someone like to make a motion for the corporate. Name by Councilmember McCutcheon, second by Councilmember Nye. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the core budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstained? The motion passes. All right, moving on then, we're going to go to Public Works, no information items for action. We'll move into the 2024 Public Works operating budget.
Well, I'll start. I'll take a shot at it and you can jump in if you feel necessary. Members, the Public Works budget is prepared for your review and comment. By and large, the 24 budgets based on the final end of year 23 budget. The total dollar amount is slightly less than we're going to be spending this year. There's a few things that probably should be pointed out to your attention if you're not already thinking about it. I guess one, Thomas, you want to talk about the personnel expenditures at all?
Yeah, I can speak to the personnel. So under the personnel, we do plan on adding an employee. So the vegetation specialist role that we plan to add to oversee our tree program, but also more importantly, and this does actually fall into right-of-way maintenance, but also parks and trails maintenance. They will also see the operation of cutting grass across the city in 3 different domains. Right now, we actually have our right-of-way maintenance contract out for the RFP is out in the wild right now. It's we're hoping to have a lot of nice submissions on Thursday. In this case, we are actually going to be pulling out cutting grass from the abatements from, and we're gonna be separating it into three different tiers, but we're pulling it out of the general right-of-way maintenance contract, and we're pulling it out of the parks contract, parks maintenance contract. And we're hoping that this will allow us to find individuals that will complete the job for a lesser amount. When Glenn Gailey retired, we saw a significant increase in our unit rate for cutting grass. What you'll see here actually is under landscaping, but also under not landscaping, under the roadside mowing, we're over budget this year, and it's because we expected a certain amount from, we're using daily numbers to prepare for last year, and we have a new vendor this year. How we plan to help address this and why we're able to go down with a better figure that's more realistic and more in line with our previous estimate is because we do plan on pulling it out and having a three-tiered system where the individuals could bid on either abatements on public right-of-way or parks and trails. So we're hoping to get three different rates, one being most likely more expensive than the other based off public safety and traffic control measures having to be in place for right-of-way. So we're hoping that being separated out from the overall budget and having a vegetation specialist to oversee it will allow us to have less frequency and only need it when we need it. And also to save us money in the long run. And I'll say that's probably one of the biggest expenses that I see come across my desk. The most amount of invoices is the fact that we have a lot of grass cutting that goes on and it looks nice. And we want to maintain that type of aesthetic. That being said, I do think that there has to be a better rate out there because it is burning us at this point. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, I think that was one that I wanted to touch on was the mowing expenditures that are in the contract. And again, we're going to try to put out a separate bid for the mowing to try to get more competition for that effort and hopefully reduce the expenditures and or we'll have to look at potentially reducing the amount of more we're doing at the same time. So Dan's been kind of working on that a little bit, hopefully get that pulled together for bids later this year. But it will be separate from the right-of-way maintenance contracts, which you will be looking at your meeting in 2 weeks. Because those bids will be due on Thursday. So, part of the maintenance contractor bids to you at your next meeting. Beyond that, I think the other one that needs some discussion or probably warrants a mention is the 2023 budget. We do have the expenditure for deer hunting in the end of year budget. That is about $216,000. That's White Buffalo's contract that was approved at the June meeting of the city council. That is a 1-year expenditure for that program. So that would be for sharpshooting this winter, January, February. But that does not include the following years. So there is going to need to be allowance made if we're going to continue that effort for the future years. So just be aware of it. That is a significant amount of the public works budget. It's basically 10% of our budget. So it's very difficult to come up with that amount of money with what we're doing right now, quite frankly, and it is not reflected in the current 2024 budget.
And it does have to come out of operating, just to.
I'm glad you brought that up because I had my hand up about that a while ago. So out of curiosity, what was it White Buffalo estimated to continue the program for 2024? What would that cost? About roughly the same thing?
Yeah, so that's an interesting piece here. And, we did the math on it. We broke it down to about $720 per deer.
Right.
And if you apply that, let's kind of look at the two different scenarios. We've been told multiple times by White Buffalo that it's not necessarily the number of deer that they're killing that's costing them money. It's them flying out, getting hotel rooms, the support staff that takes into account and all the safety measures they put in place to ensure no one is doing anything funky. It is a very professional program. So we could expect very similar costs, even for a lesser number of deer the following year. I could see a little bit of a decrease, but it would probably offset the inflationary numbers. So we most likely are looking at 216, somewhere around that number, and it should go down by year 4 or 5, just based off the sheer quantity. They shouldn't have to pull as many days.
Okay, so here's where I'm at. So we kind of made a commitment to start a program, right? And what we don't want to do is shoot some deer, then do nothing, let the population go back up because we didn't continue to maintain and allocate it and then backstop. The three things I hear the most about: internet, erosion, and deer. And deer is a public safety concern. The rankings for the United States came out. Missouri is number 10 on the worst states with deer strikes as well, and population ratio. So I cannot pass this budget without including a recommendation to amend it up to $220,000. And I'm going to say take it out of reserves. That's just where I'm at. I'm being really realistic. I can't squeeze any more out of tax revenue when we don't make a commitment as a city to pass the internet use sales tax, or parks tax. So I've got to get it out of somewhere. We've had this discussion at a council meeting. I think it will be helpful when we're at a council level and we're discussing what to do with $1 million trash rebate, whatever, and looking for more information, is if we make a commitment as a committee and say, we have identified a need, we don't have a way to pay for it, we have extra in reserve. And 220,000, I realize that it is 10% of your budget, but if you put it in perspective, we have a 68 square mile city, and that's less than the average cost of one home in my ward. One home, and we improve public safety for an entire ward every year. I have people with multi-million-dollar houses that do a small house remodel and spend more than that. So surely I cannot nickel and dime $220,000. So that is my amendment.
We don't have a motion yet on the floor, do we? So I don't think,
Well, I guess that's I need a second.
so let's, all right, so you're making a motion to amend.
Well, I guess it would be, it doesn't have to be to amend the budget. It could just be to approve the budget with up to $220,000 for fiscal year 2024 for deer management.
Here's how we could do this. So you have two different ways. We could just start with first making a motion to approve what's there, and then you could try to do an amendment there. Or you can just make a motion that is approving it with the change already there. So it's whether you want to first just get what's here on paper approved and then see if you can do the amendment. That's an option.
I guess if nobody hates it, it would be easier just to do it in one amendment. But if somebody is going to amend it and get rid of it, then.
Well, can you kind of clarify where it is, what you're wanting to do?
Yeah, it's line item 763 -00 on the last page. So city administrator Lee indicated it would be roughly the same cost for next year. And I'm thinking, okay, what if there's inflation? So up to $220,000 would be allocated to continue the deer management program for 2024. And that would be in another ward, whatever ward White Buffalo picks. Right now, there's no continuation of the program.
Well, let's see, Councilmember Clark and Councilmember Jackson.
So maybe, might I suggest that instead of the 220, we look at this as a whole project instead of task. And we look at it as this is the whole project and amend it to say the whole amount over a spread of years, because I don't have to do the skin next year. You know what I mean? This is a project that goes over 5 years and not just year at a time. And so that we have it covered. I mean, we need this plan. We need, I know you've been working on it, but this plan has to be laid out as a project, not, okay, in December, here's what we're gonna do, because that takes out maybe 300. But like you said, if we don't maintain with the archery plan or whatever we're gonna have, where is that? We haven't seen that. That's what we've asked for. That's what Rob's report laid out was the needs for the plan. That wasn't the plan at all, but we need to have, KPIs, KPAs, and we need to have a real plan, milestones that we're going to meet over the time period, because taking out a few deer is not going to be something that gets us where we want to be. We have a goal at this endpoint. How do we go from the beginning to the end? And I would suggest that we do that as maybe it's your motion, but as the motion to go over all the years and take it out of reserves. It's not $1 million, it's like 700,000. And because this is an important project and we all voted for it to be an important.
I don't have a problem with that. I just don't know if I legally can make
Yeah,
that
that-
the motion because it's only the 2024
I-
budget posted.
I've got clarity there. So there is two, I guess, scenarios. You could not, in this case, we could say a motion for the 2024. But we have to appropriate, the council has to appropriate every fiscal year. So we would have to come back, even if it's just included, it's already earmarked. But it would still have to be a line item for the budget. So it would, in this case, we could also though, and talk to White Buffalo and say, could we tack on a 4-year agreement on top of the agreement that's already in play?
Yes,
So that would be a way where that would all count, depending on when that is paid, but we would encumber the funds. That would all count against next year's spreadsheet. So just wanted to give you that heads up too, versus having us in the red on the 4 following years.
I have a very specific question about this, and I may have this totally wrong, please just correct me. Several times when we brought up reserve, we've been told that that's only good for one-time projects. It cannot be for continuing projects. It said we sound dangerously close to a continuing project over multiple years there, so.
You have to define the
I
scope. So
think-
You define it as.
yes,
Said,
Right, so that, I think your suggestion makes sense. If we wanted to try to attack it with reserve funds, I don't know that we even have to worry about it if we attack it with the $1 million windfall, whatever. I'm just throwing that out there as we've got to think those.
from my understanding, it does seem like the deer management expense, even over a 5-year period, would qualify for the reserve fund expenditure. But that being said, too, right now, and this is just a good, FYI as well. With that 1 point, and technically, we only have, when we're looking at the revenue and expenditures, we have actually only received 800,000 of that 1,010,000 this year. So we do have that money still. It's not like it's gone, but when you look at the spread for revenue and expenditures for 2023, we only have net positive 800,000 because those were collected between 2000, I believe 2005 and now. There was multiple, just $1,000 here, $1,000 there. If we get to January 1st and those funds have not been spent, no matter what we do with those funds, doesn't neglect what we do with them. But when we're looking at the balance sheet, we are going to then, it's almost like it doesn't exist at that point, because now you can no longer count that money as revenue. So if we are going to move with that cash specifically, it might be important to move with it before January 1st, because that'll help make the balance sheet actually balance if we do spend it before.
Truthfully, I think we can go either way, and I'm gonna take maybe some advice or some of Ed's comments earlier about we have this reserve, but we have a need for our city, which is to make it safe. And I can't look my constituents in the eye without saying, look, I'm doing what I can to make it safe. And so I think either pot's good. I think we need to figure out what we think is the best and make a recommendation to the council.
I would like to comment on it. I think that my concern is that, taking out of just a general reserve would indicate that the budget is not balanced because we're spending more than we took in. So the likelihood of that straight scenario is where I'm concerned, and potentially even a veto. And is there enough support to override a veto? I do think there is a question of what is a sufficient reserve. We actually have a very healthy reserve, $16 million. When you look at cities that are near us, last time I looked at this, which may have been about a year or so ago, I don't even think, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, anyone's even close to us having this kind of reserve fund. Of course, cities are different in population and so forth. But I do think that what should be explored is what is the right amount for reserve. The state tells you have to have so much, and that's a far smaller number. But if we can determine what is the reserve policy to say, this is what we feel is enough for the city to hold on, then the issue is that when we have years where we end up spending less than we took in, it just goes back into this hole of the reserve. Maybe those are the years where, you know what, that extra money, our reserve is, reached the capacity. If we have that policy, then that extra money can go into a dedicated fund that can be used to fund things that come up like this. Otherwise, right now, it comes across as putting your hand, taking money out of that reserve jar. And reserve jar is your rainy day fund. So if we have to have a policy that says what is enough to determine that. Because otherwise, year after year after year, all we're doing is just throwing it into the reserve, keeps getting bigger and bigger, but you can't touch the money. Or, well, you could, but I don't think we've had that kind of precedent of touching it. That's my opinion.
One other item too is with the current amount of reserves that we do have, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but with the current amount of money we have in the bank, if you will. If you look at the revenues, it's actually very interesting with interest rates where they're at this year with bonds and with our repo rates actually really well and our CDs that we've been able to take advantage of. We've brought in 1.33 million on interest off that income. So that 1.33 million comparatively to what was done in 2022, which was only 469,000. So interest rates were going up a little bit, but we have seen a significant increase there. So one thing to understand is that is a big portion of our revenue generator is making money off this, but there's also a good argument to be said that, if you need to do something, maybe there is a determine the right amount that needs to be reserved.
So does that interest go back into the reserve or does that come into the budget?
Goes back into general, it counts as general revenue. It counts as a positive, but anything that's left over would go into the reserve. So it's a general revenue.
So
goes
if
into
you
general
do a
fund.
good year where you've spent less, you don't get rewarded, it goes back into the reserve. So I know Ed's got his hand up and
Just a dumb comment. Wouldn't it be possible to put this where I think it belongs in public safety? Put $1 million into out of the reserves or the unused fund over into public safety instead of trying to bury it. Administration. I honestly think we're getting a little hung up here. I would challenge you to talk to any one of the 35,000 residents and ask them what our budget is. We're the only ones that seem to care about it. And I get the campaign thing, but that's kind of sad. I know when we had $1.5 million and we had to make a lot of things happen. Now you're sitting there saying, how could you ever go out and tell people, well, we can't afford that, or it's not in the budget. We're just like this building. How in the world do you take something like that and say, well, we don't have the money to paint the step? I don't think residents would buy off on that at all. But I think the public safety would be everybody's car insurance, all those type of things. Can't do it.
We can, but I think you can, but I would say the public safety funds, it is defined broadly, but in practice, most people, all those expenses would be as defined with the police department. So that would be adding, we could do that, but
But one project, you would manage the project, but you would take it out of an operating expense and put it into the police or to the public safety.
yeah, so mostly out of practice, though, it hasn't really strayed from when the funds are put in that public safety fund. The vast majority of the time, those funds are then utilized for either the addition of officers, the addition of equipment for the officers. You can't, that was one thing I pondered here, and actually I was talking to Rick about this earlier today with deer management. We questioned, is that a public safety issue? And it could be, but we could get a lot of flack for utilizing funds in that
From
manner.
who?
It just hasn't been done yet. So if someone wants to challenge it,
Yeah.
typically it's tied to a police cost, which maybe we could do like the actual surveys the police department does. That could be potentially something that could be easily under public safety.
I think this is deer management originated out of Board of Public Safety. In fact, it was the police who conducted the survey. I think it kind of goes back to the root cause that when we talk about road improvements, it's to prevent accidents from occurring. That's the main issue we're trying to address is those deer damage to vehicles and all. So, I mean, I guess, you could make an argument there is some kind of attachment to that. That's my opinion. We've got a couple of hands up, so we're gonna go Deborah, Lauren, and Nathan, sorry. Thanks for pointing out. All right, so let's do Deborah.
Yes, I think Prop P was a state initiative. And it had specific things only that money could be spent for. And while us providing a safe environment and the deer with the whole deer issue, and it is a safety issue for our residents, it is not, I don't believe, one that is defined within the actual Prop P itself. So that's why I don't think we can mix those two.
We have to probably research that though. Lauren and
Yeah, I would just say keep it at the council level because we're at a different place than we were before when it was in a citizen committee. Deer management spun around for a while, not trying to say they didn't do good work, but we didn't have progress or a contract or an action report at the same level until the council took it over. And I would agree with what you said, except I've had the opposite experience on watershed erosion. So Joe Farmer and I are the two council members left, and we would have council meetings where we would say things like, we're willing to spend out of deficit, or we would have this cohesion, where as a council, we were willing to make a commitment and throw money at it. And then I would go to the citizen committee, and people that had never looked at the council budget and had never looked at even a line item budget for watershed erosion were saying the city doesn't have any money for this and we shouldn't spend any money. We don't have any money. And it was the exact opposite of what the council commitment was. And so you would think that they would say, you've got money in reserve, spend it. But I've just had the opposite experience and it was really disheartening. So I would say keep it at maybe that's just who was appointed to that committee.
Oh, but they don't have a vote for your budget.
No, they did vote on the committee to approve things or move things out. So the things were killed as a recommendation from watershed erosion and never moved out of that committee. So it did affect the budget recommendations. Yeah, it did negatively.
all right, let's go to, we've got a couple of hands. So Nathan, then Teresa. All right, Nathan, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. I guess my question is we have walked around this whole thing. I guess the concern is, and I'm looping it back to the original concern raised by Councilmember Edens, is that if we're going to do deer management, it's definitely not a one-year project. I think if we're going to budget for it, and I'm sorry if we've kind of covered this in the midst of it and I've got lost in the weeds because we've jumped across 17 different types of subjects around this. We need to make sure that it's accounted for in its entirety and not a year-to-year thing. If we agree to do this and that it's going to be a multi-year thing, then it should at least be budgeted for so we can account for those funds. As you mentioned, Chair Garitano, we don't want to then have to go into saying, well, we'll just use reserves for it. I think having an understanding of where the money is and just assuming that we'll run at a deficit to make up for it is not a balanced budget. And I don't think it's really prudent to go into a budgetary agreement when it's, we know we're going to need to spend this, and not having anything budgeted for it just sets us up for a conversation basically every year. We're going to have to make this adjustment and figure it out when we could just, kind of deal with it up front.
Teresa?
I think Nathan has a good point. If we have a budget and we are spending all of that budget already, and then we add this on, that's 10% of the budget, it's outside of the budget. So we needed that extra money. So, and yeah, I think there's going to be people that say, why are you taking it out of the reserves? What are we going to do for the rainy day? But we have to do what's right anyway. So if we don't have money in the budget, we have this project that we really need to address because, we don't want to wait until, like Rob says, a bus full of Girl Scouts gets in an accident, runs off the road or something, he says.
Just one child.
Yeah, and we don't want to wait till that happens. And And it has gotten, the numbers have increased since we did the count. So how many we have out there now, we have no idea. This year, it has been prolific in how many have been, the increase in the population. So if we have to take it out of reserves and take the hit from residents that say, you know, I didn't want you to take the money out of the deficit, use a deficit, and we'll just have to take that hit because we got to do the right thing for safety, regardless of what somebody says.
So where are we at with the motion?
Well, we don't have a motion on the floor yet,
I'm
but
just gonna, and I know this is probably gonna make me sound like a broken record, but there is one auxiliary option here. That this is the first year of this program. This with White Buffalo specifically. What we could do is we're working on the 5-year plan, the more extended version of the plan. If we wanted to, you know, I think I have all faith in White Buffalo. I think they're gonna do a fantastic job and I think they're gonna hit that up to 300 deer mark. We could have this set up where we look at it as an item that could be amended in next year. Just want to plead the devil's advocate once again. If they do great and they just meet or exceed the expectations set out in the contract, and we then plan a 4-year deal with them to continue and extend. And this could be considered the pilot study. We would do then after the completion, you're expected a report on April 15th. We could then have another study conducted in the area that they hunted and see what that 300 deer or whatever deer they actually hit, what that amount is. In this case, if it's a great job, they did a great job, we can add we can always amend the budget at mid-year. Not saying that's a good practice, but this is the first year of us actually rolling the dice and applying what we've been talking about. So just wanted to provide that option.
I could support that if we follow what Joe also brought up, which is in the interim, we as a council have got to make a decision on what's the right number for our reserve. Because I feel like we've got to get to a point where we can fund, where this is funded. And I can easily look somebody in the eye and say, we're taking it out of the reserve because it's a safety issue.
I think it's very important that, you know, for accuracy and, you know, everyone here and those watching, that contingency that is required. And I'm looking at last year's budget. So that operating contingency by the city, just a little under $3 million. So we far exceed what is required by the state. Doesn't mean we have to obviously follow that exactly. I think the extra is good, but we just don't know what that number is until we have a good policy around what it is. So I think that's important there. The other thing is, and I think it would require some further exploration, because Prop P was very broad when it comes to police and public safety. We had at the end of last year, public safety reserve just under $1 million. So I don't have that because I guess that's a different budget. But you know, where's that reserve number today based on what's being collected? And you know, is that, you know, I think would require further investigation by the city administrator. Because I've seen uses of it that are broad regarding it. We're using it for a public safety measure. That is probably the only reason that's really driving this here.
After fiscal year 2024, we're expecting that Prop P fund to have $1,055,000 left in it. And that is being used to fund increases in the amount we're spending for police services. We're
So
using, I
that-
think, $378,000 out of that fund next year.
So you're taking out 378 out of the 1 million, but you'll still have about 700.
Well, no, we'll still have $1,050,000.
Oh, you still have it. Okay, well, maybe that's thought there.
That's a
City's
thought,
still-
but I'd request that we really dive in and make sure.
Yeah, I
We would
think
need to
we would
run
wanna
anything
defer
like
to
that behind, yes, because I mean, I think that, well, there's another item here too. Second, sorry.
And did you have something you
I
wanted
just
to?
meant that we as a city are still putting $1.5 million in on the police budget. So Prop P generated that money. but we as a city are adding money into it. So to me, you should be able to take that project and put it under public safety, because Prop B is all by itself, it's broad, but the city still is kicking in 1.5 million city fund. Pretty close.
I do think that if we want to move forward tonight, and I'm open to what Thomas says, we may not be at the point yet where we want to make a motion specific to that. Maybe it's a motion to direct the city administrator to investigate the use of Prop B for the public safety component of the landing gear to reduce accidents. I think that would be one option there. See if that we can present that. Now, that would probably have to go straight to council because we wouldn't be meeting again.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a thought there. You know, we could approve just what we have tonight, but make a separate motion so that we don't lose sight of it. And if not, then if the information doesn't come back, you can always make the amendment at council if you feel very passionate about funding it out of reserve or something.
So I'm sorry, I have another question. So the amount that is budgeted for 2023, which is this year, is it our expectation that that amount of money is going to be completely utilized this year, or is there going to be carryover to next year for that?
Are you talking about this year? We're
Yeah.
expecting quite a bit of a surplus for this year. It's because we got that 1,010,000. We're expecting, I believe it's like one. Total number.
So my thought is if to try to help where you're wanting to go is just divide that number that you think we're gonna use this year and what you think we'll use next year, and put the overage basically under the 2024, and then we can figure out what it is that we're gonna do later on. That's just one
So
suggestion.
the item there, when we're talking about the balance sheet, if it is a revenue recorded in 2023, unless you enter into a contract that covers fiscal year 2024, whatever year you want to determine, you can encumber those funds. So once that December 31st mark swings by, even this whole 800,000 that we counted as revenue in 2023, we cannot, unless there's a contract tag to it, we cannot bring that over to 2024, at least for the balance sheet. That is, not saying that that money doesn't exist. It's just for our revenue versus expenditures, it no longer counts.
And our contract is only for 2023.
Yeah, well, it's technically fiscal year 2023. We approved this funding via ordinance to fund this year's efforts, 2023 circa 2024. Then next will be 24, 25.
Great.
And I was gonna say, and the option is, if we want to test this program and then this is something that could be amended. That's what we did this year. So if we want to go over that process, that's fine too. We noticed it as a need. But it can be, if we notice they did a great job and reduced the deer population in the targeted any one map, then this is something that could be a portion for at the mid-year.
Well, that's always the backup.
That is always, that is the parachute, that is the safety plan.
Well, that that type of project, to use it as a trial basis, I could support that too if we have the project plan laid out first. The 5-year, 6-year, whatever it is, the one this year plus 5 years, of the plan laid out so that we see what we need done to reduce the deer population, not based on how much it's going to cost. That of course comes into it, not based on whether or not White Buffalo is the ones that do it. To have our plan in place and say, okay, we're going to see if White Buffalo does it to our satisfaction. And then we go ahead with our plan, whether we have to make adjustments or something and find where we get the money from, but we need to do this. in the city for safety of our residents. So regardless of all of these other things that happen, and we have to decide, and do we have enough reserves, and how much reserves we need all of that information, of course. But first, if we and the council get an overarching plan to look at, to say, is this the plan we want to go with? And from that, determine where the money's gonna come. Then I could support it.
Yeah, two thoughts. I thought there was some issue with waiting till mid-year because White Buffalo could have started earlier, but by the time we booked them, they were already full up. So what happens if we?
In this case, we would continue talks with them, and it's exactly what we did this year. So we didn't know if the program was gonna move forward. It wasn't budgeted for in 2023. We passed by ordinance to amend the end year, but actually, I didn't even mean to say mid-year, the end of the year budget to include this $216,000 expenditure. It would not mess up the schedule with White Buffalo as long as we were in consistent communication with them and showed them intent. I believe, and Rick, if you want to concur or not.
Yeah, that was just my concern.
I don't think that
We
would be-
sign a contract and they're full, like, there's no room at the end.
They are a popular company. That being said, if they served us, they're gonna serve us this year. This is happening. I think that they would honor that commitment.
And then building off of what Councilmember Marshall brought up. I know you're looking at doing an exploration of Prop P money, but it doesn't just have to be Prop P money. So if we're contributing over $1 million here and the police have access to this budget and the funds are building up, we can decrease this and they can take more out of that Prop P reserve. My thought would be that that's temporary because we want to build up that Prop P reserve. So the understanding is it's for that 5 years or whatever. So we're really just changing the contribution amount because they have access to the Prop P for their own needs. So we don't have to meet it under your management.
Yes.
We're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yes, well, kind of.
Yeah.
On that case, and the thing is with the Prop P funds, they really, even though it is broadly defined, typically, I mean, it is a dicey subject and you typically don't want to stray too far away from anything that's not police operated with those funds.
Yeah, as long as it works out, so we're not actually cutting their budget that they have access to, because I'm not trying to decrease service, I'm not trying to increase the total amount of line item in that regard. So if they can supplement it with the money that's in the Prop P savings that they're already not using, and I can free up some money that helps them, they're, answering less calls about deer strikes, everybody
One piece
wins.
there too is that the Prop P funds have to be used for new expenses. So in this case, there would be a certain amount that would be the maximum amount of what could be used out of that fund, because there's only a certain amount from the police budget this year, from last year, that is considered new expenses. So what we do is we actually do cover some of the salary of the individuals because they've received a salary increase, and that's a new expense. So I think that we're already probably topping out what we can utilize those funds for, but I can look into that to see what that max number would be.
So what do we need to do tonight, Joe?
Well, I think until we get more information regarding the use of property would work, and how we can apply that, I would say at least we want to approve the current budget as proposed. But, I would say make a separate motion to direct the city administrator to explore the use of Prop P for purpose of the deer management to reduce,
Or our
Not
windfall,
Not just
or a
the- not just
reserve?
Prop P, yeah.
or keep it, if you want to broaden it, yeah, even better, yeah, that would be better.
In this case too, I did want to mention that we were, based off the budget presented tonight, we're operating at a $42,000 general fund surplus. So in this case, the 220, you can carve out, it would be more like 180 a hit to the reserve. So just wanted to clarify.
So to tack on real quick to what you just said, I think we make a separate motion then. In the military, one of the things we do is we come back with courses of action. So I would encourage that the motion basically be to direct the city administrator to give us courses of action that say we could use the windfall money, course of action A. We could use Prop P dollars, course of action B. We could use, give us the recommendations that you have or that your team have, you know, that the council can consider. And then we put it before the council and make a decision. And if that decision is that we have to use reserve funds and that runs the risk of a veto, then the council will at least have looked at all of the options that we could come up with and be able to make an informed decision. That would be my recommendation. And I'll make.
I mean, that's a hypothetical scenario, but I think there's a sensitivity of, you know, having a deficit, I think.
Well, I understand. I'm just saying that's another option. It's not.
So that's a motion.
So I think the motion, let's get the first motion, which is approving of the budget as it is, and then the second would be, if you want to make it.
Yeah, I'll make the second one. That's fine.
Would you include a 4-year contract exploration?
Yes,
Okay, that'd be great.
absolutely.
So
Okay.
what are you wanting first?
First motion to approve the budget.
I move that we approve
Okay.
budget as stated.
Deborah with making the motion, second by Tracy. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the budget? Say aye.
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 Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, so then we will look for the second.
I'm sorry, I had another. Just a trivial. Point compared to this year management on that budget, just a trivial point. Under purpose, it still lists Waste Connections as our waste hauler.
Oh, yeah, it does. I saw that. Yep,
Thank you.
you're right.
That actually does remind me too. Can I add one more thing, Mr. Garrett? Sure. I did also, and this is not included in the budget, but after discussion, and I wanted to explore this, I do think it could be pertinent to have a generalized collared polo that has the General Wildwood logo for both staff and council, and this would be considered our uniform for any event that might not be, have a T-shirt dedicated to it, but also allow for any of the events we do have, we can state that, hey, staff will be wearing a gray polo and it will have the Wildwood logo on it. If a kid gets lost or if you need help or you need assistance, then you can easily identify an individual. So wanted to add that it would cost around $1,800 to get every council member and every staff member a nice collared shirt that could be representative of a uniform. So I do just wanted to add that so you're not surprised when it's added.
You want me to
All
restate
right,
the
you want to
motion?
go ahead and restate that motion so Michelle can capture it.
So I'd like to direct the city administrator or team to provide the council with courses, and I don't know, is it the council because we're where we're at in the timeline here, or will it come back to the committee?
I think it's probably gonna go to council.
We are meeting on the 24th, so it could
Okay,
theoretically
bring it
come
back
back to
here.
the committee.
All right, back to the committee, courses of action that include, and I'll leave it up to you, basically, any courses of action for potentially funding your management so that we can make a recommendation to the council for how to do this long term, including it or with it focused on funding it for the full 4 years of whatever the inclusive, sorry, how do I word that? Inclusive of basically of the plan laid out of a plan for the totality of the 5 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to wordsmith it. I'm so sorry.
And that plan includes the maintenance as
Yes, maintenance aspect.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Oh, Councilmember Clark.
second.
All right, second, any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right, next, we're gonna move on then to the combined road and bridge fund.
Yeah, you want to start tomorrow.
Council members, the road and bridge fund budget is presented to you tonight. A few comments about it in general. Most of the items in the road and bridge fund are actually essentially contract maintenance items of work Like a large part of them had been previously funded out of the operating budget, public works operating budget. In fact, you can see remnants of those general ledger items in the operating budget currently, but by and large, it's contract maintenance work that we do. I wanted to point out at least one thing, that the revenues that are going into that fund are relatively flat. There is some increase that I believe is due to the recent fuel tax increase at the state level. And then as Thomas mentioned, we are seeing some nice interest as well. So those two functions are creating a slight increase in the overall revenue for the fund, which is nice. But so anyway, we have incorporated that increase a bit into the budget for this year. So for 2024, we're about at the well, frankly, we're about at the same level as 2023, 2.8 million, a little bit over where we were a couple of years ago. I will point out a couple things in the overall road and bridge fund. If you flip to the summary sheet that's included.
Is that the last page?
We look for 2024 road and bridge fund. Lists all the items that are funded out of that. I guess it'll be the second to last sheet of the pages that are included in there. Couple things, the concrete pavement replacement project, we have about 1.3 budgeted for that project for next year. It's up slightly from last year. We cut that expenditure a great deal after COVID, because we had to cut back, and in my opinion, cut it back way too far, closer to $750,000. So we are bumping it back up. We started that this year. And I think that's a good thing, and probably needs to be even higher in the future if we can manage it, frankly. Our concrete payments have diminished, and we need to spend more money on them in the future if we can find it. So it's at 1.3, that's like a decent number.
And I think
for
one
next
thing
year.
to importantly note here, Mr. Brown, is that if you put more money towards your concrete pavement replacement, you're gonna end up spending less money in asphalt patching. So overall, if you neglect roads without replacement, you're gonna end up patching more roads because of wear and tear. So if you invest the money up front in replacing the concrete, you end up with a nicer looking product, and you have a more long-term product, as long as you have a decent schedule that rotates different areas of the city.
So the goal is to do less patching and more pavement replacement essentially. And it's about 30%. So that was the one thing I wanted to mention. The asphalt pavement resurfacing line item is at 625. It's up a little bit. Could probably spend a little more there too, but I think we're in probably better shape with our asphalt roads than we are relative to the concrete streets, frankly. So with that, I'm not going to go into any greater detail, but if there are any specific questions that you have, I'm glad to entertain them at this time.
Questions, or just make a motion?
So Rick, traffic control signs. I know we've been talking about putting up pedestrian signs. Is that part of traffic control, or is that something totally different?
You're talking about the, Ms. McCutcheon, the rapid flashing signs at the crosswalks?
Yeah, for
So,
crosswalks.
it's a good question. So we do have a pot of money for traffic safety improvements that could be tapped into for those kind of things. But by and large, it would probably come out of the capital improvements budget. This is more capital maintenance items rather than adding new infrastructure. So generally, I'd rather see that come out of capital improvement.
Yeah, and whenever it says traffic control signs, that's like if we're working on a road, we got our contractors working on a road, and they're putting up signage saying detour and whatever the maintenance, whatever the direction may be.
This one would actually be new signs, or I mean, it'd be replacement of existing.
Oh,
signs.
no, okay, so
It
that,
wouldn't
you're
be-
talking about,
It would be temporary, it would be permanent signs, but replacement of existing permanent signage. If the other ones. A little confusing, yeah.
Any other questions? Or anyone want to make a motion? Bob, is there a second? By Lauren. For the combined road and bridge fund. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those abstain, motion passes. And the next and last one, under for action, combined capital improvement sales tax line.
Capital improvement sales tax. So just to go over some quick highlights here. Next year, and this is something I wanted to note, we do have 100,000 put towards the capital improvement of this building. That being said, we are working to get a structural engineer in here that's going to provide us with a background of what it's going to cost and what it's going to take to get this building fixed, leaks, and just more of the structure of it. Settlement issues. So that might be a number that may not necessarily adequately cover it towards the middle of the year. So just an update there. What you'll notice too is for watershed erosion task force projects, we do have 250 set aside there. You might ask, there should be more there. That being said, we are planning to go through a tireless effort with MSD and with the proper permitting agencies to be able to get approval on these things. So to get the actual setup, it's going to take that much time, and we very well might not even spend that 250. Is that a good estimate, Rick, that for the watershed erosion projects to get everything where we need to be? I'm thinking the big expense will come in 2025.
I think if the intent is for engineering and permitting, yeah, that would probably be a reasonable number, because that's what we've set aside. The construction money would be coming year after that, so.
And then the other item to point out that's important as well, for the Main Street extension to Etherton, 250,000 has been set aside for that. And we're really looking to do the utility locates next year. It's going to be a while to get that project fully into the ring. And right now, we didn't want to dedicate so much money there. We're pulling away from other projects when we know we're not going to get through all the hoops to actually get it done next year. So the 250 actually might even be a little bit lower after the utility locates are identified. Some highlights to go through here is the Manchester Taylor resurfacing project. And if Mr. Brown would like to speak on this, more than happy to let that happen. But that looks like it's going full steam ahead. We do have grant funding associated with that project. And then the other item would be the Route 109 conceptual study of the Clayton Road and Route Route 109 VA South roundabout, the actual construction of it. So those two are probably the big ticket items that we do see movement on. And overall, those are probably going to be the ones that encompass the majority of the funds for 2024. And then the Village Green does have an earmark for $2 million because we unfortunately have lost a location for our large events. So we do hope to at least get that ground straightened out so we could hold events on this and, get it to a better space. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least get the utilities out there. And the department's available for any questions. Rick, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was going to mention the 109 conceptual study. That was something that I was recommending we budget for next year. And the thought there was take the engineering effort, take that first step with engineering of improvements to 109 from Clayton up to BA South. So there's been a lot of questions about what we need to do there and what would work. And this is kind of taking that first step to hire a consultant, have them do a conceptual study, put something on paper, potentially have a public meeting, involve the school district, emergency services, and decide what it is we want to do there. I think obviously we'd be looking at possibly roundabouts, widening the road. Might also look at signals too, because we got signals out there right now. So kind of contrasting those two potential options, widening with signals or widening with roundabouts. What's the cost to do it? How would we do it? Is it split it into smaller pieces or not? Once those questions get answered, we'd be in a better position to go for funding or look for federal funding or other pots of money maybe to go forward with improvement. So that's kind of why that's in there. I also wanted to, if you don't mind, I added a bridge maintenance budget item in there for 150,000. And the thought there was that we really need to get more proactive with our bridge maintenance. in coming years. And so that it's kind of in there as a placeholder to do bridge maintenance work. We'd like to get a consultant on board to help us plan for that and really put a plan together, like our year plan. So that we can say, well, this is our multi-year plan to spend and maintain our bridges, and then we can work the plan once we get that. So that's kind of what that is for. Hopefully we can bring that to you. The consultant contract to develop that plan. I won't be the next meeting, but soon thereafter.
And one quick note, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, along with the, and I'm sorry about this, I forgot about it. Along with the general capital improvement in the road and bridge fund, we need to approve the department tonight is requesting approval on the 5-year plans for both as well. So those were in the attachments for 2024 to 2028. We'll also be requesting approval on both of those items tonight.
Teresa,
I have a question on the capital improvement. The line item under replacement shows that it was 35,000 for 2023 and then again 35,000 for 2024. Was that a different, I mean, we were going to purchase a minivan and then we didn't because we were able to fix the minivan. So is this the same? Is this a different vehicle you're talking about?
No, so in this case, the minivan is in pretty bad shape. We did get it fixed miraculously. One of our employees was able to go in there and tinker with it and was able to get it started. It is working now. That being said, we already went through the approval process to get a new vehicle to replace it. This would be the item to hold it. That being said, we're looking at next year, 2 items. That van could fall apart again. So that's one contingency, but we're also getting a vegetation specialist added to the rotation. So that individual is going to be responsible for going out in the more warmer months and monitoring the people cutting our grass, but also the individuals that are putting out the trees and maintaining the trees. So in this case, that person will need a vehicle, and the only vehicle they would be able to drive is in pretty rough shape. And we're pretty much anticipating that if we need a car this year, we will move ahead and replace the van, but that money technically disappears at January 1st. So we got to have budgeted money for another car once January 1st hits.
I guess I would suggest that you, if you anticipate needing a vehicle, that you get it sooner than later because the prices are going to skyrocket. And especially after the strikes that have been going on. So, and I can help you with that if you.
I'm gonna say at the municipal league conference, one of the things we learned about is there's grants and rebate programs available for cities that are converting, like that have fleets, converting to electric vehicles. So it might be cheaper to get an electric vehicle, but then you also have to budget for the installation of the charging at City Hall. But it could be forward thinking and it may be cheaper in the long run, so consider that.
Except for repairs.
Yeah.
anything else?
Sorry. I'm asking lots of questions. So when we came in, and the other, the Economic Development Committee was having a discussion, I think Katie pointed out something that I know we all had been on our strategic plan, was not establishing new parks, but taking care of the parks that we already have. And I noticed on this more detailed list that there are like some parks on here that aren't, that we're thinking about constructing. Whitener Park, there's cost on here in the next long run for the 4-5-year portion for Bellevue Farms, which in the past, that's not a city park, that's a St. Louis County park. And we were going to assist them very little, but not necessarily give them funding for it. I noticed that was on there. And it's got, the Green Pines, trail. They've got it as local money, but it's actually grant money. So I don't know if you split that out differently or,
McCutcheon, actually, the design will be our responsibility. It's not covered by the grants, the construction.
The construction.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, but I just thought that that was something to point out is and then there's Route 66. That's a brand new park, so I don't know. I mean, we spent a lot of time on our strategic goals and I don't know if that's something that's our discussion here or discussion later or whatever, but I did hear Ms. Dodwell bring that up and we have discussed that several times.
Yes, and at this time too, just the Route 66 roadside park, I mean, that 75,000 that's earmarked there would not be enough. Oh, that's, sorry. With the Route 66, actually, we should have had that off 2024. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, that is there. We'll look into the department. Of that.
I only want to bounce off of that because I think council's been clear as mud to staff on this issue. And I can't think of another, I don't mean it in an offensive way, so I just can't think of another phrase because I'm really tired, but like two-faced because the same council that will say, I don't want a new park immediately in the same meeting will be like, but the Village Green needs to be built as soon as possible. Well, that's a new park, right? So you have heard everything. And the same people that brought up the concerns about not building new parks are the ones that voted in the Parks Committee for all of those other parks because they've recognized it's part of developing the Manchester corridor for economic development. So I would just say, if we've already indicated that we want the park, or like the Portner Park was donated land. So there might be, you don't want to give land that's donated back. You have to accept it. You build a new park because you got a freebie, right? So I'm sorry that we're clear as mud, but if we've given you an indication that we want it built, don't suddenly go, even though the strategic goal said don't build new parks, that means we don't want the Village Green. If we've given you direction and you budgeted for it, don't take it out, please. And we'll try to be better humans. I'm so tired. I'm very tired.
Everybody gets tired.
Yeah.
It's been a long meeting.
But if it makes you feel any better, I don't think of Village Green as a park.
But technically it is.
It
Yeah,
is, it is.
Exactly, yeah, it does, but that's what I'm,
That's the
we're just like, we're just,
Yeah.
we just,
That makes
yeah.
Green face.
Yeah, great, but yeah, I get what you mean. It's, I think of it more of a quadrangle, like, Mizzou has quads. I think of it as a quad.
I think we all have a different idea. And it's fine, I don't have an issue with leaving in whatever it is in here. I just thought,
No, I'm glad you brought it up, because we've all said, yeah,
All right,
that's how we define things.
well. Then we just need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, and then can we also go back and approve the capital improvement sales tax fund 5 year as well? I don't think we had a motion for the road. bridge. We do an official motion.
I don't think so, wait in.
No, I don't think we did.
Operating budget,
Right.
yes, we did
We did.
road and bridge. Jackson made the motion and he didn't second it.
Okay, so now it'd be
And-
capital improvement
And
5
capital
year.
improvement.
Thank you, Michelle.
But is that on the agenda?
It is, it's included in the packet. It's part of, under this capital improvement, under that attachment. It is, the 5 years attached to it, and we like to separate it out just because. Yes, well, no, not for
We
operating.
can make a motion that includes both.
Yes,
Yeah, so just make a motion for approval of the budget and then the 5 year.
a motion, the department is requesting a motion to recommend approval of the 5 year road and bridge and capital improvement sales tax fund.
Just make that motion. By Lauren, is there a second? Teresa, Any other questions? All those in favor of both of the motions, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain, anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, well, then that takes care of all the items of this action. So we will have our next meeting later this month, which is October 24th. So this is month where we end up having 2 meetings, but then we don't have one in November, so we break there. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Anything on the miscellaneous?
Joe, what's this?
Oh, that is our policy passed by resolution in 2011, approving the expenses of reserve funds. It was discussed during the last committee meeting, so I did pass that out along with the general revenue and expenditure sheet, along with the changes in fund balance sheet. That was the 3 documents that I passed out earlier. They're not included on the agenda. It was just for information.
All right. So then, we need a motion to adjourn.
Joe.
Oh,
Miscellaneous.
you do? Okay. Go ahead.
You gotta look up what's what. Have we got any plans to work with MoDOT or do it ourselves to paint the guardrails along 109 a darker color?
Yes, so at this time, we have talked with MoDOT consistently about that. We're a little upset that they did not come to us in the first place to discuss those guardrails. We have received a quote for what it would cost to do it, and it was something like, wasn't it around 0.5 million for 18,000 feet of guardrail that they've installed, and they've installed it at random spaces. So it would, and we would have to agree to maintain those guardrails for the rest of it, for perpetuity, for the rest of its existence. So it would, you know, if the council wills it, it's something we could definitely work with. We've talked with Thomas Industrial Coatings. It is sitting around 1.5 million to paint those guardrails.
Did they not know ahead of time that we wanted that?
They moved forward and then they were already laying them out by the time we reached out to them. And at that point, it's cheaper to do it in the yard, to paint them in the yard before they go out, because once they're out, then you have to pay for maintenance. In this case, we would have to pay for the, not maintenance, we have to pay for traffic control. In this case, we'd have to pay for the traffic control, which escalates the price dramatically. And we did inquire whether or not we were going to bring it to the committee and then to council if we could paint it in the yard, because that would be a lesser fee, probably around 600,000 or so. And they turned us down very quickly. But we do have a quote on file, and if it's something we would like to do, we can bring it forward. I think we should have MoDOT come forth and explain that.
Number 2. Last month, we were told that the elevator would be repaired within a month.
On Wednesday, they'll be coming in. So they did replace the controller drive. Now they have a plug that has an issue. They, the individual that came here and took it out actually lost the plug that plugged it back in. So it should have been up and running about 2-3 days ago, but they're coming out tomorrow at 9:30. And our insurance company will be out here with them to do testing on the controller drive. So it should be up and running tomorrow, fingers crossed. But it should be.
All right. If there's anybody with wheelchair, we'll just tell them, sorry, we don't have a plug.
That's
Number 3. Just something to think about that we have these iPads for the council members. And just an idea that in the future, if we're looking at doing upgrades, that it would be very helpful to have computers instead of iPads. Because there's so many times that, you know, I'll do a matrix or something on my computer, then I don't like having to send it from my computer to my my work email or my council email from my personal email, but that's the only way I can get it to that iPad. So if we had computers that we could do all of the council work that we do behind the scenes on that, I think it would be very helpful.
I would second that comment and add to it that sometimes just doing email on this godforsaken thing is a challenge. And if I were doing it on a computer, I would be able to do it like that.
So I'm sorry, but I have go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think we should ask which council members would need one or want one, because I have my laptop. I would not use it. I don't use my iPad because they usually bring my laptop and I can use whatever I want on there. So like, I wouldn't want council members that don't need one, we would have to purchase.
I just was told when we first started that it's better to not use your personal.
Typically, it is better not to mix devices. You can. What I would recommend if you
It's so
do, yeah, if you do that, if you do want to use a laptop, I would recommend I would open up the application being Outlook. Open it, do what you need to do, close it, and then go on to your other daily activities. I wouldn't have it just opened in the background. But typically, they, end of the day, it has to be government related. Gets a little bit more iffy with you guys, but for us, I mean, I make sure, I personally separate my devices.
Well, I was told that somehow you have to count that as,
You run the risk of sunshine law,
Mhm.
right? And your own personal laptop.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is the risk.
I guess.
so
I know anything.
anyway, if we had one that was dedicated to that, it would be so helpful.
And yes, and another thing too, typically if a sunshine request were to come in, it would ask for correspondence that would be pulled via email. We can pull that email without even accessing your device. So that part is not as bad. It's more so if you're working on it has to be a record by the city that is now on your computer. So just be careful saving stuff.
Right,
Are you finished?
No, I
Okay, go ahead.
had a list of things, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, the council chambers, the way it's set up, I have had a comment from somebody that sits down there in front, that their backs to the audience all the time. Is there any way that we can rearrange that so that the staff is not sitting with their backs to a room full of people, so that they can at least see who's walking up behind them at any given time, just for safety measures?
The department can look into that. I know with the desk that Travis runs specifically, that one's a little bit more cumbersome because we can't move those wires. That could mess up the system in there, but we can look into that. I think that Megan, I don't see why that would be an issue as long as the council endorses it, having to face the opposite directions.
Just,
As long as I feel like as long as she can see the mayor, because they communicate sometimes
That is true.
during the meeting. And
That
I
is
feel like
the-
she gets his attention or they talk a little bit, and if
No,
your
that
back
is
is
true.
to them. I don't know.
well,
safety. Don't like.
Well, the other option and what has been looked into further is putting walls behind those individuals that are made out of the same material as the dais.
Whatever it is to make it more safe for them, that's would be my suggestion. And the last thing I had was, you were talking about making this plan, Director Brown, about making another plan for the bridges. I think that's genius to have that, put that together and have a good standard operating practice for perpetuity, so that if you're not here, if you're gone for some reason, that somebody can take that out of your manual of SOPs and say, how do I have to follow this? You know, if maybe you get sick or something and you're gone for a while and there's not someone to direct that. If we had that book of all of the standard operating procedures for everything that's done with maintenance and work on roads, bridges, things like that.
We also work to do a maintenance schedule for the building once we get the issues fixed. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
That's all.
Deb, you're up.
Yeah, I just, an update on the sewer lateral. You were looking into that, I thought. So is there an update?
I can. So with the sewer lateral program, the problem is we found out that the individuals that are on septic would not be included in that coverage. So in this case, it was pretty much down on arrival because that's what killed the ballot measure in the past. So at this time, we're gonna have to have a, come in moment and say, hey, or do we want to do this with just individuals that are connected to the main sewer line?
Yeah, I think the issue is before it'll be solved by the new communications director. Because we didn't get the information out there in enough time, nor was it clear.
I think we need to keep that moving forward and find the best option there.
It does cost, and I can bring this back to committee, it does cost a significant amount to get something on the ballot. So just want to make sure that's known by everybody too.
Not in April, though, right?
Non-April, well, it's still a cost, but they're
Yeah, it's a
not.
cost whenever you get the ballot. It's been more expensive.
Anything else? Anyone?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Rob,
Dude, I was gonna
second.
be Joe Farmer.
Tracy,
Second.
all those in favor, say aye.
All right.
All right.